Hi guys, it's Liam from Lanterna here with another IB geography video. If you haven't checked out my previous videos, I encourage you guys to do that. This video comes from your paper 2 again, and that's your core paper, but this time I'm looking at the kind of final unit of the 3, which is global resource consumption and security. And the content in this particular video looks at some of the stuff that is at the latter stages of your Unit 3 syllabus, but I think it's really important to discuss it early on and to get a really good taste of it, because it is a conversation that is kind of reigning around us all the time. So we're looking today at thinking about population and resource consumption. So the relationship between them, we're looking at kind of population limits, but we're also looking at the different views and the arguments that individuals have come up with over the course of history about how the relationship between a growing population and resources is maintained or disrupted over time. We're then going to look at the concept of resource stewardship, which I'm sure is something you guys have heard of before, but we're just going to be looking at, okay, how can we be the best caretakers of our planets? What are some of the kind of movements or some of the innovations that recently humans have undertaken in order to make sure that we are able to provide for ourselves into the future? Okay, again, we're looking at sustainability really, but we're going to first discuss a conversation that has been going on for a very long time in terms of population and resources. And we're going to look at first some pessimistic views courtesy of the Malthusians. Okay, so this was Mr. Malthus in the bottom right, and his argument was we have a certain carrying capacity on Earth. So this is a diagram showing along the kind of x-axis time, so over time what's going on, and then population is along the y-axis. And we're seeing this exponential growth. Yeah, it says there populations grow geometrically. You guys know from that first part of paper 2, that population topic, we know that the global population has increased exponentially over time, but the view of the Malthusians is that we have these limiting factors that mean that eventually our population will level off, and those limiting factors come in terms of resources. So nature is the main one. If we don't have enough particular animals or plant life, we're going to be unable to provide all the food resources for this exponentially growing population. When we kind of reach that ceiling, when we no longer have the natural resources on the planet to provide everyone with a suitable diet with their needs in terms of their nutrition, then we will reach this top, and the population will not be able to exceed that. So there might be a massive amount of deaths, famines, quite dramatic predictions in terms of the Neo-Malthusian view. Here is just a summary. So the world has a limited amount of resources. Nature somewhat controls excessive population growth. It should be controlled was also the argument, because if we keep population control unchecked, then we might lead to these huge catastrophes. So that's your famines, that's your conflicts over particular resources. Again, this all links to the geopolitics and ownerships, as well as equitable distributions of resources. So that's something we talked about earlier. Again, you can bring that into your essays, particularly when it comes to resources and its relationship to populations. And then, as we said, the growth of the population is fundamentally dependent on a supply of food and appropriate agricultural methods to provide that food. And that means that perhaps within the next 100 years, we will reach that limit, and we will see some of those huge catastrophes coming into place, and that'll be through those disasters. Okay, so that's the Neo-Malthusian view. The kind of optimistic view and the opposite view came from a lady called Mrs. Boserup. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but you don't really need to know how to say it, you need to know how to spell it. So it's Boserup, and she was saying that actually, instead of having this check where we're going to eventually have a ceiling by which we can't kind of push through it because we have a limited food supply, innovation, okay, in terms of agriculture, in terms of food provision, in terms of all sorts, will enable us to keep increasing that food supply to match the rising total population. You can see that in those steps. So it'll be the same sort of axis, time, and then population or volume. We're talking about food supply, and then we will have these jumps based upon innovations in the food sector. And that's her below me, looking kind of similar. But she said that we will find ways to solve these shortages. And that scarcity will be reflected in price. So as population goes up, price increases. Therefore, there is that profit incentive. Some of you guys might also be doing economics. This is where these two subjects really come together. So yeah, as I said, as there's more incentives for innovation, we'll find that increase in supply, and that allows for the ceiling to be pushed back further. Okay, she's not saying that ceiling will never be reached. Okay, but it just gives us that more time. It gives us the ability to grow larger as a population. And that is fun, theoretically, if we keep doing that, we'll never reach that ceiling. But again, that's just a theorization. Just shows you the opposing views. So that's the pessimistic view, is that we're going to hit that ceiling. We're not that carrying capacity. It's a really, really good phrase to use. We won't be able to provide for everybody on Earth. Therefore, we have these big disasters. Boserup, opposite opinion, that actually we'll be able to innovate because of that profit incentive, and that'll mean that there'll be more to go around. Population growth can continue. Then we have this compromise, and this is probably where we're operating right now, and that's in terms of resource stewardship. Okay, and the idea is that we can avoid some of those predictions that Mr. Malthus provided us with. He was saying that we're going to reach that capacity by innovating. So that would be falling under her kind of optimistic view. But at the same time, the stewardship part of things means that we have to be good caretakers. We need to look at the existing structures and how we're operating right now in order to preserve, as well as we possibly can, what we have on Earth right now. And for the last kind of few minutes of this particular video, I'm just going to discuss two examples of some resource stewardship practices that kind of hopefully illustrate what I'm trying to get across to you. That not only do we need to be innovative, but we also need to recognize, okay, what is going on with our resource distribution right now, our production of resources, and how can we improve that? How can we maintain what we have without without harming the environment or the populations that exist around that environment effectively? Okay. So here's a really good example. This is the circular economy. To the left, we have the least sustainable or the least kind of resource stewardship approach, which is just a linear economy. So we have raw materials which are produced, or we use them to produce something. We use them and then we throw them away. That's non-recycled waste. A reuse economy would have raw materials, production. We'd use it, but then we'd recycle it and we'd go back into production. But eventually, after a couple of reuses, we have that turn that into non-recyclable waste. And what we're trying to kind of get to eventually, although it's very expensive to operate and it takes a lot of there's a lot of administrative barriers, there's a lot of existing structures that you have to disrupt to get here, is to try to move towards a circular economy. That's whereby we have these raw materials which are then produced and used, but we recycle the end product back to those raw materials. So we have a never-ending supply, rather than having something that will eventually go to landfill or will eventually become a resource that is no longer reusable. The aim of a circular economy is to have every output as an input to the next loop. And if you guys saw my previous video in terms of global climate, you'll know about feedback loops, positive feedback loops, negative feedback loops. A circular economy is a very good example of feedback loop. Okay, so again, that's a little bit of revision we've just done on this new topic. But remember, okay, we need to make sure as stewards of this planet that we are being as effective as possible with the resources we have right now, regardless of the innovation that we predict will come. A circular economy is a really good way of transitioning towards that sort of mentality. And then finally, we've got the SDGs. These superseded the MDGs, that's the Millennium Development Goals. I'm sure you guys have heard of these. Okay, so the UN initiative. They came up with 17 of these SDGs for all the world, all those UN nations, to try and work towards. This kind of develops on what I mentioned briefly earlier. Kind of resource stewardship is not only about the resources that we have around the world, but it's also about making sure that the people that are responsible for maintaining or protecting or producing those materials are cared for as well. So it's not only, the SDGs are not only kind of environmentally focused. You can see a couple of them now, like life on land, life below water, protecting the planet, but also making sure that we do, okay, as countries, as citizens, as people who are responsible, who are stewards for the planet, that we make sure that the communities that exist around these resources are cared for. So, your clean water sanitation, gender equalities, again, those, or a number of these were also part of the MDGs, shows you that there's a lot of progress still to be done, but really great, and sort of, the first step, this is I don't want to say revolutionary, but the first time in history that sustainability has been on the agenda so prominently for one of these huge multilateral organizations such as the United Nations. And I'm sure we'll see in the future when the whole world opens up again, as I hope it does, that we'll be able to see more and more of these discussions and bigger actions taken. You will, of course, know, though, that the Paris Agreement, which was signed a couple of years ago, has sort of disintegrated to some extent with the exit of the United States. And there's a lot of these tensions that make resource stewardship and sustainability more difficult. Those, again, are conversations that we will have to discuss to get over the issue of carrying capacity and making sure we don't hit that ceiling that Mr. Malthus predicted we would. Cool. Hope that was really useful. I really find that topic quite interesting. Again, I'm happy to hear from you guys. You can email me. Just liam@lanternaeducation.com. You can request a video, or if we want to discuss something at more length, by all means do that there. We've got loads of other videos as well. So if you're a geographer, by all means watch my previous videos. But I'm sure you guys are also doing your sciences, your maths, maybe your psychology, your economics, your history. We've got a whole set of other free videos on our YouTube channel by some of those top tutors. And again, click the link or type in www.lanternaeducation.com to find out more about how we can help you guys out with your IB. We have a network of over 100 elite IB tutors who are ready to help you in any essay topic, particular part of a course, syllabus, problem, you name it, they're there, and they're raring to help you out. Cool, I'm going to leave that there and see you guys in the next video.